They said it was peaceful without me, then saw me alive. I just got out of surgery, heart's ticking again, and I figure my family would want to know. So I texted the group chat, surgery done. I'm okay. Nothing. Just these brief, cold replies, like I was some distant stranger. Sitting there, in this bland hospital room, I felt this weird weight. Like all those years building a family didn't matter. They barely looked up from their screens to check on me. I wasn't invisible, right? But it sure felt like it. When the nurse told me a walk might be risky, I didn't care. I needed to see something else, feel something real. So I slipped out, alone, just wandering the hospital grounds in the cold dusk. A quiet rebellion. Then suddenly, my name and face popped up on the local news. That's when the cameras found me on the bench. They let me go with a folded paper and a bottle of pills that I'd probably forget to take half the time. When I stood up, my legs trembled so bad I had to grab the edge of the counter. I tried asking the nurse if someone was coming to get me. She gave me that tired smile, like she heard the question a million times before but didn't want to deal with it now. Is there anyone meeting you out front? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She glanced over her shoulder, then back at me without really looking me in the eye. We can call a cab if you need, she said, but it sounded like she expected me to say no. I nodded. No, it's okay. Someone said they'd be here. She kept checking the clock on the wall, fingers tapping on the plastic frame like she had somewhere else to be. I stayed there, leaning on the counter, waiting. Minutes stretched longer than any time I'd spent pacing the hospital halls. The chairs in the waiting area looked empty, but somehow heavier, like the silence was too thick for anyone to just sit down. I tried to ignore the prickling in my chest, the way my breath felt shallow and unsteady. Cold drafts from the air conditioner whispered past, making my skin crawl. I thought I heard the front door open once. Heart jumped. I straightened up, squinting out past the sliding glass. Nothing. Just the empty parking lot bathed in the sick yellow glow of streetlights. No car. No footsteps. Just me. I sat down on one of those uncomfortable, plastic chairs that don't cushion anything. My hands shook as I unfolded that paper again, pretending to read the care instructions, but the words blurred together. My skin still tasted metallic from the 4 needles. My head was fuzzy, like I was underwater without knowing how to swim. I thought, maybe if I get up and look outside again, someone will finally be there. So I shuffled myself to the door, slid it open, and stepped into the cold night air. The parking lot was completely empty. No familiar faces, no cars waiting. Nothing but the echo of my footsteps. When I came back inside, the nurse was still at the desk, scrolling through her phone. She looked up just long enough to lock eyes with me, then back down. No words, no offer to do anything else. I sat back down, head hanging, feeling the shame settle like a weight in my gut. Maybe it was me. Maybe nobody was coming because I didn't ask clearly enough, or because I'd pushed people away before. I hated that I felt so small, so forgotten on this hard plastic chair. Every few minutes the nurse glanced toward the clock like the time itself was trying to rub the waiting away. She didn't say anything about how long I'd been there, like I was invisible. I realized no one was coming. Not tonight. The idea should have hurt more than it did, but I was just numb instead. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat there, listening to the quiet hum of the fluorescent lights and the night settling in around me. The hospital corridors buzzed with energy earlier today, people running, doors slamming. Now everything was drained and hollow, like a shell left behind after the storm. And I was still there, just waiting, hoping for a break in the silence. Maybe I should have called someone myself. Maybe I should have told them how weak I felt, how I couldn't find the strength to stand. But I didn't. And now I was stuck with that cold, sinking feeling that no one cared enough to show up. I looked back at the door, willing someone to come through it. My throat tightened, but no one came. The nurse kept checking the clock, pretending she didn't notice I was still there. I wasn't supposed to walk more than 50 meters. Not after what the doctor said. But I made it 100, maybe a little more, just out of some stubborn pride, or maybe because standing still felt worse than moving slow. I stepped out into the gray cold, the sky hanging low and heavy like it wanted to keep pressing down on me. The wind was sharp, slicing through the thin jacket I had on. I kept my hands stuffed in my pockets, shoulders hunched, like I was trying to disappear into myself. I called a taxi. I swear I did, but that first one canceled right before it arrived. The driver said some excuse about traffic, but I could almost sense the hesitation behind it. Or maybe it was just me wanting the world not to want me here at all. So I called another. Same thing, canceled. A third time, too. I just shrugged each time, but inside something clicked colder. Like the universe was pointing, saying, "You're on your own." The hospital behind me looked bigger than it felt only minutes ago. The glass and metal all so clean and cold, like a yacht floating in a sea of quiet misery. No one waiting outside for me. Not even a person who pretended to care. I stood in the half-empty lot, feeling the bitter slap of wind on my face and knowing I couldn't ask anyone for a ride or even a second glance. Even my phone was losing signal. Every small thing peeled away until I was just a man standing there, alone, with nothing but the gray sky and the quiet ache in my chest. Step by slow step, I started walking. It wasn't like I had anywhere to go. My apartment was miles away, but that didn't matter. I wasn't aiming for home anymore. I needed to escape the buzzing silence that had settled in my mind. The way the building's fluorescent lights still hummed in my memory, like a ghost I couldn't shake. Passing empty benches, I thought I should sit down. But I didn't. The air felt too real, too sharp. Like it was pushing against me, daring me to give in. And maybe I wanted to prove I could keep going, that I wasn't broken yet. But damn, I was exhausted. My legs felt leaden, my lungs were burning, not just from the cold, but from everything inside that I wasn't ready to breathe out. There wasn't a soul around except a couple of parked cars and the occasional distant sound of a bus rolling by. The city felt like a whisper deadening into silence. I pulled my collar tighter around my neck, fought the prickling sting behind my eyes. Maybe it was shame. Maybe it was just the ache of being so completely alone when I needed someone the most. I hated myself for that a little, for thinking I could tough it out, like some hero or survivor. Real life isn't a story, and I wasn't coping. Not really. My phone buzzed. A message from my sister, simple and sharp. "Are you okay?" I froze. Did she really expect me to answer like everything was fine? I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, but I didn't type back. I couldn't. Not yet. What could I say? I'm drowning. I wanted to disappear. Sorry for being a failure. None of it felt honest enough. I slipped the phone away and kept walking, faster this time. The wind was picking up, and the clouds looked heavier. My breath puffed right in front of my face. I thought about calling someone, anyone, but the words were stuck. Who would want to hear me spill this mess? Not my sister. Not my friends. I was supposed to be strong, to hold it together. As the city lights flickered on through the haze, I saw a small coffee shop up ahead. The door was closed, but the neon sign buzzed weakly. For a moment, I thought about going in, about sitting down and letting someone see me. But then I shook my head and kept walking past it. Maybe I wasn't ready for that. Maybe I never would be. I wasn't far from the hospital now, but every step away felt like sinking deeper into some emptiness I didn't know how to fill. I told myself I'd call a ride again, that this time it would come. But there was that nagging voice inside, whispering that maybe no one was coming. And just like that, standing on that cracked sidewalk under a sky that felt more like a trap than protection, I realized I really had no one. Not here. Not now. I thought it was just exhaustion, the cold getting to me. But then the silence stretched longer, and I felt something shift inside, a quiet desperation settling over me, heavier than the fog pressing down on the city. I stopped walking. I looked back toward the hospital, its windows glowing dim in the dusk. I wanted to turn around. I wanted to run back inside where it was sterile and predictable, but I didn't move. I just stood there, waiting for something, anything, to break the silence. I sat down on that park bench feeling like I could finally drop my guard a bit, even if just for a minute. My legs were shaking, hands still a little clammy from whatever rush had pushed me through the last hour. I don't even know what. All I knew was that I just needed to sit, with my back against the rough wood, and not have to think about anything. The air smelled like rain had just passed, and that mix of wet grass and exhaust hit me like a weird kind of calm. I didn't realize there was a TV crew nearby until I heard someone say, "Hey, you okay, man?" I glanced up and saw a guy in one of those bright jackets holding a camera, the kind you see on local news spots, and a woman with a clipboard and one of those mic sticks aimed loosely in my direction. It was clear they were in the middle of recording something, a charity event or fundraiser, I guess from the little banners and people milling around. I wasn't in the mood to talk, but they sort of circled me gently, not in a confrontational way, more like they figured I might need help or a story. I wanted to say no thanks and just be left alone, But when she asked me if I needed anything, I caught myself looking like a mess. Eyes dark from too little sleep, shirt wrinkled and dirty, face probably drained of color. I must have looked worse than I felt, because their tone got softer after that. They asked if I needed help. I told myself quietly when I replayed it later. I said no, but I guess my face said otherwise. Because before I knew it, the camera is rolling, and the woman's voice was calm and easy, asking me what brought me here, what I was thinking about, stuff like that. I hesitated, partly because I didn't want to share, but partly because it was like someone hit pause on everything else pressing on me. Even if just for that weird moment, I had to try and explain. I just needed somewhere to sit. I said at first, unsure how much to say. The girl nodded, encouraging me without pushing. So I spilled a few things. About how life had been grinding me down, how I'd been running on autopilot, and that maybe, just maybe, coming here was a dumb attempt to find some kind of peace. I realized as I talked that I hadn't actually told anyone anything real in a long time. It was strange, but comforting. The guy behind the camera caught a few close-ups of me staring at the ground, and I remember feeling embarrassed, like maybe I was overexposing myself. But it wasn't like I could stop it now. They had me mid-sentence, and the lady's voice was soft, repeating something like, "Sometimes the hardest thing is just sitting still." I'm pretty sure I sounded way more sad than I actually was, but whatever. They were gentle about it. I half expected them to pack up and leave after a few minutes. Instead, the woman asked if they could come by again for more footage later, maybe talk to me about the charity event. I laughed a little, kind of ironically. I didn't belong in any cause or event. I was just that guy on a bench that looked like life had knocked him around some. But maybe that was part of the story they wanted. In the back of my head, I caught myself wondering how many people would see it. The footage of me like that, looking tired and lost on a city bench. Part of me hated the idea, but another piece, maybe the lonelier part, felt weirdly okay with it. Like if someone out there was watching, they might get it. They might know what it's like to sit in the middle of a crowd and feel invisible. They wrapped up after a little while, and I shoved my hands in my pockets, suddenly feeling exposed. I told them again I was fine, really, that I didn't need anything. The camera guy gave me a quick nod, like he understood more than he let on. I stood up, brushing off my jeans, trying to put as much distance as possible between me and that bench. But even as I walked away, I felt this odd connection, like something had shifted. I wasn't sure if it was relief or just the exhaustion settling deeper. Maybe I was fooling myself to think that anyone would care. The weird part was, as I left, the crew packed up and one of them smiled at me. A real smile, not like they were doing their job. Like maybe they saw something beneath the mess. And for some reason, I wanted to believe them. But then I thought, how did I end up here, on the evening news, looking like my life was breaking? I wanted to disappear, but somehow, I was about to be put right in the spotlight. I guess there's no such thing as a quiet day when you're this tired. I remember the moment she showed up at my doorstep like it was yesterday. Not the usual TV crew with flashing lights and cameras, just this woman with a notebook and a kind face. She asked if I had a few minutes to talk, said she wanted to hear my story, the real one, not the headlines. I wasn't eager, to be honest. I've learned that people don't want to hear the truth. They want drama or pity. But there was something in her eyes, like she actually wanted to understand. We sat down on my worn-out couch, the one that sags in the middle from years of use, and she started asking about my life. Not just the big events, the losses, the mess, but the quiet stuff. Things I don't usually say out loud. She asked what it's like, getting older, being alone. I told her directly, I'm not sad. Not really. And I could see that surprised her. It's the usual story, right? People say, of course you're sad, you're alone. But I gave her the truth. I'm not sad. I'm just forgotten. She wrote it down, nodding slowly, like she was chewing on every word. It felt weird, saying that out loud. Forgotten. Like I was some old thing left on a shelf, no one bothering to dust me off anymore. My kids? They're around, on paper. But life has pulled them away from me in ways I can't fight. I don't blame them, not really. They have their own lives. Still, that feeling that you exist but don't matter, that you're just a ghost in your own family, it's hard to swallow. I talked about how time feels slippery now. Days blur, and nobody calls just to check in. I didn't make excuses. I said it flat. I'm not angry. I just feel like I don't belong anymore. Like the world passed me by while I was stuck. She asked if I wished things were different. If I wanted company, if I wanted someone to care. And yeah, something inside me twisted, a mix of longing and shame. Maybe, I said, but it's complicated. I don't want to be a burden. And sometimes, I think I don't deserve it. Her eyes didn't judge, just stayed steady, waiting. It was probably the first time in years I felt seen without all the noise and judgment. I remember looking at my hands, aging and wrinkled, the skin thin enough to show the veins underneath. I ran my fingers over the scars from years ago, not just physical ones, but the scars left by being left out, left behind. The silence in this apartment is thick sometimes. It presses down in a way that makes you want to shout, but there's no one to hear you anyway. She asked about family and if I missed them. I hesitated. Missing someone is a luxury when you're not sure they even remember you in a real way. With a small, brittle laugh, I said, they're here, but it's not the same as being with them. It's like being in the same room, but behind a glass wall. I told her how visits have become awkward silences and half-hearted explanations. How every holiday I'd brace myself for the end of a goodbye, not the start. And yet, I wasn't bitter. Not exactly. I told her, I guess what hurts is not being involved anymore. Not being trusted with the real stuff, the mess. I used to be the one everyone came to. Now they don't. She wrote that down too, what I said about not being sad, but just forgotten. The last thing she asked was, what do you wish people knew about you, really? I looked at her, and all the defenses I'd built up over the years came down just enough to let the quiet truth through. That even when I'm quiet, I'm still here. That I haven't given up. And that maybe I just want to be remembered as someone who cared. The day ended with her packing up her gear, promising she'd get back to me soon. But I already knew. This was the rare moment when truth didn't feel like a trap or a spotlight, just a line drawn in the sand. I closed the door behind her and stood there for a long time. Nobody called that night, but I didn't feel quite as invisible as before. Maybe it was hope, or maybe just the weight of finally being heard. Either way, it was something. I thought that silence would hurt less now, but it didn't. It just felt different. That night, the news came on around dinner time. I was sitting in my usual spot when I caught the headline. They were showing footage from the hospital, my face on the screen under the headline, Elder Abuse Victim Rescued. I froze. I didn't realize how much I looked like a ghost until then. My son and daughter-in-law were in the living room, and the second the segment started, they stopped eating. I saw it in their eyes. Something snapped. The reporter was going through details, mentioning the neglect, the calls that went unanswered, the bruises on my arms. When the camera panned over me lying in that hospital bed, they both leaned forward, staring as if trying to make sense of the man on the screen. They recognized me immediately. There was no mistaking it. My own son's face twisted first in shock, then something worse, panic. His wife gasped, covering her mouth like she hadn't believed this was real until now. I watched them exchange a quick, frantic look, and suddenly I felt my heart speed up, not from pain, but from a strange rush of power, like somehow this was finally their problem. Why? Why didn't you call me? My son half whispered, clutching the armrest so hard his knuckles went white. I didn't say anything. I just remembered the nights when his phone rang over and over, 67 times, they told me later. 67 calls that I let ring, ignored, letting them call me, hoping they'd never really believe I was that desperate, that broken. My daughter-in-law's voice cracked. We didn't know. We thought he was fine. We thought you were managing. I wanted to scream. Managing? You never once showed up, I said, voice low. Not when I needed you. They kept staring, as if the weight of their neglect landed on them all at once. It was like the world flipped. Before, they held all the control, calls ignored, visits postponed, excuses made. Now, watching me on that screen, scared and frail, they were the ones panic-stricken, realizing how badly they'd failed. And then came the guilt. It filled the room, thick and suffocating. My son wiped his eyes, swallowing hard. Dad, I'm so sorry. We should have been there. His words trailed off. I saw it. The realization of all the moments they missed, the calls not returned, the apologies never made. I felt something bitter twisting inside me. Not relief, exactly, but a long overdue recognition that the tables had turned. They weren't the ones controlling this anymore. I thought maybe this moment would bring some closure, some relief. But instead, it left a terrible silence. Like everything that was broken between us was now just thicker, heavier. The shame in their eyes wasn't enough to erase the past. Finally, my son looked at me. really looked, and said, "We're going to fix this. Starting now." I wanted to believe him, needed to believe him, but part of me knew that words alone wouldn't undo years of silence. The screen flickered off, the room felt colder. And as I sat there, hearing their shaky breaths, I realized the hardest part wasn't that they'd seen me like this. It was that now, they couldn't unsee it. The moment I woke up in that hospital bed, I was expecting, God, I don't know what, exactly. Maybe a cold silence. Maybe the usual empty space where my family should have been. Instead, a woman in a sharp navy blazer was standing beside me, clipboard in hand, smile like she meant it. She introduced herself as the social worker, but I didn't really hear her at first. My head was pounding, everything blurry, my mouth dry and sandpaper rough. Then she started talking about support groups, community programs, places I could go to. I thought about shutting her down right away. My family had ignored me for years, barely said a word to me by the end. Yet here was this stranger, already treating me like I mattered, calling me sir, asking me my name like it was important. She told me people in the neighborhood had been asking about me, that they wanted to help. I could barely believe it. People I'd never met, from church groups and local organizations, were stepping up, offering rides, meals, even just someone to check in on me. The shift between her warmth and everything else felt impossible. I stared out the cracked hospital window, the city buzzing below, and realized how alone I'd felt for longer than I cared to admit. But now, hearing these kind offers, it was like something was cracking open inside me. I thought about my sister, about the way she turned her eyes away when I walked into a room, the way my parents pretended I was invisible at family dinners, as if I was some bad smell too gross to acknowledge. Those years of silence felt heavier than this hospital gown wrapped around me, heavier than the bruises I was covered with. They embedded themselves inside, deeper than any cut or broken bone. And yet here were strangers, who didn't know me a damn thing, calling me by my name and promising to show up. The social worker stayed with me for a long time, sitting quietly, finally leaving only when the night shift came in. I remember watching her walk out and feeling, for the first time in forever, something like hope. Not because of what she said, but because she made me feel like I wasn't just broken. It wasn't all sunshine. There was this bitter pit in my stomach, the awareness that my family's kindness had drowned years ago, and the realness that these new faces might not stick around. But somehow, their genuine care, even if temporary, made the coldness fade just enough. Later, a woman from the community stopped by with a basket of food. She had this quiet, steady energy, like she'd seen hard things before but hadn't let them break her. She called me sir, too, and I caught myself smiling without thinking. It was strange, comforting but unsettling all at once. I couldn't help but wonder why it took me nearly dying for these people to show up. Why the folks who were supposed to love me the most had let me fall this far. Still, with every small act of kindness, I felt a flicker of something growing inside me, a shred of strength I forgot I had. Maybe it wasn't about waiting for family to come around anymore. Maybe I could start building from these scraps of goodwill, from strangers who treated me like a person again. That night, as the hospital lights dimmed and the hallways hushed, I lay awake thinking about all of it. The warmth of the social worker's words, the basket of food from the woman outside, the name they said like it mattered, all those little pieces holding together something fragile inside me. I thought I was done waiting for my family. But the silence at my bedside, that cold space where they should have been, was louder than ever. And yet, somehow, for the first time, it didn't feel like the whole story. That day was when he showed up at my door. I wasn't expecting him. I wasn't ready. But there he was, standing there, hands shoved deep in his pockets like he was cold or nervous or both. His eyes kept flicking away from mine, but he kept trying to talk like he wasn't the reason the silence had stretched between us for weeks. "Hey," he said, voice low like he was testing the air. I just wanted to check on you. Make sure you're okay." His words sounded so rehearsed, like something he'd read online about how to seem sincere. I didn't answer at first. I was watching him, the way his face twitched every time I stayed quiet, like he was waiting for me to forgive him without asking for it. But I wasn't ready for that. Not anymore. "You don't have to do this," I said finally, voice tighter than I meant. "You don't get to just show up and act like nothing happened." He swallowed hard, blinked. "I know. I messed up. It wasn't supposed to go that far. I didn't mean." "Don't." I cut him off. "Just don't say you didn't mean it." You already did. Saying it out loud made my chest tighten like a fist was wrapped around it. He looked down at the ground, and for a second, I caught something real in his eyes. Shame, maybe? But it vanished just as fast as it came back. I was scared, he said quietly, and without looking up. I screwed up. Yeah, but I panicked, and I didn't know how else to handle it. Scared, I laughed without humor. You think scaring me like that isn't worse? You broke us. Or maybe you only broke me, and you're just waiting around to see if I walk it off. I could feel the cold settle between us, sharp and jagged. He ran a hand through his hair, rubbing the back of his neck like that would erase what he'd done. I'm sorry. I really am. I don't expect you to forgive me now. Hell, maybe I don't deserve it ever. But I had to say it. I couldn't just. Stop, I said, voice low but filled with something harder than pain. I don't want apologies that come with excuses. If you meant it, you wouldn't be here trying to explain it away. There was a long pause. The kind that makes you weigh every word before you speak again, or just stay silent and let the other person swallow their own regret. I thought maybe if I came here, if I showed you I cared, even if it was too late, you'd see I'm not just the guy who ruined everything. His voice cracked just enough that it nearly broke the heavy armor he was wearing. For a second, part of me almost felt something like pity. But then I remembered the nights I sobbed alone, trying to convince myself it wasn't my fault, trying to hold on to the idea that he might come back different, that he might actually care enough to fix what he'd broken. Maybe you care, I said, but that doesn't fix the damage. You can't erase it with an apology or a look that says, please don't hate me. You already made your choice. He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the flicker of desperation again, like he wanted to reach out, but didn't know if he still had the right. Can we just try? He asked. Not fixing what happened, just try? Talk. I'll keep my distance if you want, but... I shook my head, the cold in me turning solid. You lost that option the day you crossed the line. I don't think you get to decide when or if this, us, is over. Because for me, it's already done. He nodded slowly, like he was hearing the final word. Then, without another look, he turned and walked away down the street. The door closed behind me with a sharp click that echoed louder than I expected. I thought maybe, just maybe, that would be the moment everything stopped. But the silence in the house afterward wasn't relief. It felt like waiting for the next fault line to crack open. I remember sitting there that night, my phone buzzing with Anthony's messages, pushing me to post that family apology. He wanted me to say I was sorry. For what exactly? That I tried to protect myself from years of his manipulation? It felt twisted, like he was set on rewriting the story so we all looked like victims, but he was the only one without blame. I told him no straight up. I wasn't going to participate. He didn't expect that. I could hear the disbelief in his voice the next day when we talked. Dad, come on. This could fix everything. People want to see us unified, healing. You have to do this. I just looked at him and said, no, I won't do it. That was the moment I realized I wasn't the scared kid anymore, trying to make everyone happy and keep peace by swallowing the truth. I was done. I didn't owe him or anyone else an apology for the damage he caused. Taking part in that apology, posting it on social media like it was some kind of performance, felt like giving him control all over again. Like I was reinforcing the lies. I told him this calmly but firm. I'm not playing that game. If you want to fix things, start by taking responsibility, not by washing it over with fake apologies that erase what really happened. You could hear the tension through the phone. There was anger, disappointment, but underneath, something else, like I'd crossed a line he never thought I would. For so long, I'd let him twist me into the family's puppet, but now I was pulling the strings away. He paused and said, so you're just done? After everything, I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded, even though he couldn't see it. Yeah, I'm done. That night, I felt a weight lift from my chest, a relief tempered by sadness. There was still love buried in that broken mess of a relationship, but it wasn't enough to drag me back into his world. I realized I didn't need their forgiveness, not Anthony's, not anyone's. I just needed peace, something I hadn't felt in years. I sat in the dark, scrolling through old messages from him, all the way back to when I was a kid. The lies, the guilt trips, the promises he broke. It played through my mind like a cracked recording. But I never replied to the last message he sent after I refused. It felt right to hold that space for myself without filling it with words. I knew telling Anthony no would change things forever. And it did. Our conversation stopped. He stopped asking. The silence that followed was deafening. Part of me feared it was the end, like he gave up, while another part knew this was the break I needed to start breathing again. I still catch myself wondering if I should have handled it differently, softened the blow, kept the bridge a little intact. But deep down, I can't, because owning my boundary in that moment, that refusal, it was my only way out. And strangely, saying no was the bravest thing I'd ever done. I just wish I'd found that courage years ago, instead of waiting until there was almost nothing left to save. I found myself back at that park, the same bench, the same view of the river, the same stretch of cracked sidewalk where I'd sat frozen last time. Only now, I wasn't here because I was waiting for someone to show up and humiliate me again. This time, I came alone, on my own terms. It was late afternoon, the kind of light that makes everything look softer, even the problems lodged inside your chest. I slid down onto the bench, the wood worn and rough under my palms. The city noise was distant, muffled by the canopy of trees that had leafed out fully since the last time. I let out a breath I didn't even realize I'd been holding. For a moment, I just looked out at the water, watching how it reflected the sun like it was trying to catch light in its bare hands. Last time, I was frozen in place, eyes darting every few seconds, praying someone would come and save me, or at least break the silence. But now, I was here because I wanted to be. I didn't expect anyone. No one promised to meet me. No one owed me an explanation or an apology. I pulled my jacket tighter around me against the slight breeze, more for the comfort than the cold. I thought back to that first visit, the shame wrapped so tight it felt like a physical weight pressing on my ribs. I'd replayed that moment 1,000 times in my head, the way everything fell apart so fast, the way people looked at me, the way I looked at myself afterward. But now, something inside me was shifting. Sitting here, with no one else around, I wasn't a victim anymore. I was just me. Broken, sure. Messed up too. But still standing. I looked down at my hands, scars and all, and I realized I was no longer trying to hide them. They were mine. Part of my story. I remember thinking I'd never get through it without carrying that shame with me everywhere. But sitting here, I almost felt something like pride. Not because it was easy. Nothing about this was easy, but because I'd shown up. Despite everything, I made it back to the same spot. I chose to sit here, in this place that used to hurt me, and not run away. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a message I wasn't ready to open, from someone who used to matter. But right then, I shoved it back down and forced my fingers to relax. I didn't need to respond. Not yet. The sun dipped lower, and the water turned from gold to bruised purple. The air smelled like damp earth and the faint scent of cigarettes from across the park. I closed my eyes, letting the sound of birds and distant traffic fill the spaces where my panic used to live. But even as the calm settled over me, I couldn't shake the memory that lingered, the one where I was still stuck, helpless, begging for a lifeline that never came. I knew that part of me would always be there, buried under the surface. And part of me wondered, how many times would I have to come back here to make peace with it? How many times until I stopped feeling scared to sit alone? Then I stood up. The bench creaked beneath me, a quiet reminder that time moves forward, even if you don't want it to. I brushed some leaves off the seat, almost like erasing a little piece of the past. Last time, I waited for someone. This time, I didn't. I walked away from the bench, not because I was scared, but because I was ready to leave it behind. But as I turned to go, I caught a glimpse of someone watching from across the park. Someone I didn't recognize. My heart jumped, and for a second, the old fear flared up again. I didn't know if they were just passing by, or if they were waiting for me too. I didn't look back. I kept walking. But the silence following me down the path didn't feel empty this time. It felt like a new kind of beginning. I kept the letter folded in my pocket for days before I finally let myself read it again. It wasn't meant for anyone else, or so I told myself, just a way to put everything down when the words inside my head wouldn't stop spinning. I still haven't sent it, and maybe I never will. But writing it felt like the closest I had to being seen without having to explain, defend, or pretend. Here it is. It's strange, realizing how much I craved to be loved, only to find out later that being noticed was its own kind of salvation. Not the flashy kind, not the loud, I love you on the surface, but the quiet knowing that someone saw you in the places you thought you were invisible. I spent so many years thinking love meant grand gestures, constant reminders that I mattered. But more often, it was the small things, The glance that didn't flick away, the patience in a tired voice, the handshake that lasted just a second longer when I felt like caving. I used to think family was just the people who pick you up when you're down. That's what I thought for the longest time. But I learned that sometimes it's not about who rushes to catch you as you fall. It's about who stays close enough to make sure you don't hit the ground hard. They don't have to shout about it or parade it around, but their presence, steady and quiet, keeps you from breaking completely. There's a difference between being loved and being noticed that took me years to understand. Being loved can be loud and messy. It can hurt when it's gone. But being noticed, really noticed, that's who holds your stories, even the ugly parts you don't want displayed. They carry those pieces without breaking them apart, without asking for anything in return. That kind of attention doesn't demand perfection. It just waits. I think back to the moments I tried so hard to scream, to reach out. Most times, the world didn't hear me, or worse, it heard but didn't recognize the sound as someone worth listening to. It was easier to pretend I was fine, to fold myself small, invisible. Nobody wants to be the burden. Nobody wants to be the problem everyone avoids. But now, there are people who don't let me fall. Not because they have to. Not because it's some dramatic obligation they took on. They stay because, in their own quiet ways, they see me. And maybe that's the most honest form of love there is. The kind you don't have to shout about to believe. I'm not sure what all this means for me going forward. I'm still learning how to stand without bracing for impact, still wrestling with the echoes of all the times I crashed alone. But there's a strange kind of peace creeping in when I think about those who caught me in the silence, those who quietly made sure I didn't shatter. I wonder if they ever knew how much that mattered, how impossible it felt to be held without even being told, how that silent attention did more good than any loud promise ever could. Maybe that's why I never sent this letter. Because it's not about asking for something new. It's about finally recognizing what I already have, even if I couldn't see it before. I used to think family was who picked you up. Turns out, it's who doesn't let you fall. And somehow, that makes all the difference.